The women's rights movement was a period in time where women were actively fighting for rights that were equal to men. In this documentary, a magnifying glass will be placed on the movement during the 1960s and the significant people that were a part of the period. We hope you guys enjoy. Before we dive into the significant people during the movement, it's important to look at the groups that helped drive the movement to what it became to be. Diverse groups like the American Women's Suffrage Association, League of Women Voters, National Women's Suffrage Association, National Women's Party, and Women's Social Political Union, United for Equality. Their voices, strategies, and legacies echoed a symphony of determination, shaping a future where rights were not just demanded but rightfully claimed. Across continents, they stood as beacons of resilience, weaving a tapestry of progress that continues to inspire.
Diane Nash is and has been for a long time my hero. She was at Fisk University in Nashville in, I believe, 61, 62. And she worked with Jim Lawson on nonviolent protest. She was one of the leaders of the group, but one of the only women. She did not get a lot of credit for her organizational skills and her work in the civil rights movement until recent years. She attended Fisk and married James Bevel, another leader. But like many of the other African American women in the civil rights movement, the media did not cover her, nor did the men in the movement give the women the appropriate credit for all the work that they did. Her organizational skills in overseeing the bus rides into Alabama and Mississippi were exceptionally good, and she was a true leader. I wish so. Emily's List is a current group of nonprofit women, particularly, who promote women in Congress and in national elections. They have been instrumental in getting the word out. I do not know how effective they have been to getting women elected, but I hope they have been very helpful along those lines, and particularly for raising money for women who are running for office. I believe they started in the late 90s and are still very active today. Well, I didn't know any women against the pill. Most of the women I knew, young and older, were relieved and grateful for the pill and for having control over their own health and their own planning for giving birth to children.
The pill really liberated women, and it was just kind of the thing that set the ball rolling for them. Gave them independence.
My views on how women felt that didn't agree with me are probably somewhat limited. My friends and all of the people I knew were very open, particularly the women, to women working in careers or having the choice to work at home or in a chosen career. I do think a lot of doors were closed to women, particularly in the financial industry, furthering their careers, banking, exchange, etc. The real question seems to me was, did women want to work outside of the house? And how did men feel about that?
So there was definitely, you could see, and the same thing in law, if I'm not mistaken, that more and more women were getting into professional fields to which they had not been excluded or barred, but yet not encouraged to, in which to participate.
I think the patriarchal values and views were very prominent back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I think those values of women, holding women as property, telling women what to do, thinking women were not particularly smart, and not having more than the right to vote was prevalent among many men and many communities.
Oh yes, Betty Friedan, of course. She was kind of a champion, one of the early champions of the women's movement, and she was kind of the early leader of that movement, and clearly it had a major impact on the 60s, on women's rights.
Feminist Betty Friedan is widely acclaimed as one of the leading figures of the modern women's rights movement, advocating for rights that many women today take for granted. As Friedan wrote in her hugely influential best-selling book, The Feminine Mystique, rights have a dull sound to people who have grown up after they have been won.
You know, I looked at it, to be honest. There were a lot of books back then written by women and articles. I read several articles. I picked it up, but you know, I could say I read it. You know, and had a date. You know.
Published in 1963, the book exposed what Friedan called the nameless, aching dissatisfaction many women felt in their limited roles as wives and mothers. The book signaled the start of a great social change.
Yes, definitely. I remember marching. That we had marches back then, and they were a great excuse to do all kind of things. We marched against, you know, the Vietnam War. I remember marching in Nashville against the Vietnam War when I was a freshman medical student. And we also campaigned for, there were rallies for women's rights, and they would often turn into, you'd have a band. I don't know, you know, I can't say I went to a march for women, but definitely went to some celebrations for women's rights.
Free our sisters! Free ourselves! Free our sisters! Free ourselves! Free our sisters! Free ourselves!